Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Remedy Truth Podcast. I am your host, Rita Townsend, and today I want to dive into guilt a little bit. The funny thing is I had written a lot of different thoughts on this topic months ago, and I came across it today and started feeling guilty that I had planned to do this podcast weeks ago, and then life happening and so much going on. And it's so funny how we fall into this trap of guilt, whether it's mom guilt, social guilt, spiritual guilt, relationship guilt. There's all kinds of guilt. So we're going to kind of talk about that, what God says about that, where you picked it up, because guilt is something that we learn over time. Sometimes it's a learned behavior. It may be modeled for you when you were young, or maybe you were pretty confident and then you developed a close relationship with a friend, family, a person, or a spouse, and suddenly you started feeling this guilt, this condemnation. It comes from feeling like you did something wrong and you are wrong or you are bad. It can even come from shame. And then you start apologizing and you develop this guilt complex where you feel bad about every decision you make. You weigh it out, you try to justify it, you always kind of put yourself last. You don't honor yourself because you feel guilty, because you feel like you've done something wrong. And so you have an apologizing perspective on all the choices you make and all the things that you do, and boundaries sometimes become dissolved, and you get into this apologizing nature. And it's almost like you apologize for the weather. You apologize for having to cancel that appointment, even though you have a child with a fever and you're rushing to the hospital, you're still apologizing. So if there's nothing else that you get from this today, I want you to hear my heart when I say, stop apologizing for that. I know there's books out there for that. And, there is the book from Rachel, can't think of her name at the moment, but, Girl, Stop Apologizing. That comes to mind when I think about this, because I spent many, many years of my life apologizing, thinking that I had to please people. I had to keep people happy. Don't rock the boat, like all the little things that you hear. So when you have some of this come up, when you're thinking about why would you be guilty about that? Or why would you feel bad about that? Why would you have shame about that? Whose voice is it that you hear? Even as I'm talking now, you may have an immediate person that comes to your mind. Or maybe you don't, and you're just kind of like, well, I don't really know where that comes from. I just apologize for everything. Well, I would encourage you to take a little time with the Lord, take a little time by yourself, dig deep and start to kind of think through, like, when I make choices of, I want this, or I have this desire, or I would like to do XYZ. And then you have feelings that are kind of trying to stop you or condemn that decision. Whose voice do you hear, and whose face pops up, and where do you think that is? We can talk about this forever and we can hack at the leaves, right? We can say, oh, don't feel guilty, don't feel bad, stop apologizing. But what I want you to really get is, until you figure out the root cause for why you feel guilty, why you don't want to honor yourself, why you think boundaries are unkind, and we're going to do a whole section on boundaries. It's coming. I plan on writing a whole book on boundaries, because that's something that I think is very critical and important, because without really understanding why we make decisions and why we want to honor ourselves, we're going to feel guilty about every decision we make. And that will equate to apologizing. That will equate to no boundaries. That will equate to a very unfulfilled, high anxiety life, because we're trying to please people and things that have no concern for us. They're looking out for number one. You heard that before? We're looking out for number one. My dad taught me that. He said, you have to look out for number one. Yet he felt guilty a lot. And I watched that. I remember growing up, my mother, my grandmother, different family members in my life, they were very much people pleasers. And I saw over and over where they would compromise something that they really wanted because of pleasing this person or not upsetting that person. And you get into this perpetuation of not putting yourself even in the running for a decision. It's like, no, I'm going to put myself last or not even at all because I'm more worried about this other person's reaction. Because if they're not happy, it means I did something wrong. Then I have to apologize to them. You see where this is going? Whose voice do you hear? Where did you first recognize that you were feeling guilty? We are experiencing it, and sometimes we don't even have a name for it. And so for many, many years, I just would apologize about everything. And I was in a relationship for many, many years that I had to continually catch myself, like, stop apologizing. You don't have to apologize for this. You don't have to apologize for saying no or not fulfilling someone else's unrealistic expectations. I'm going to repeat that. Stop fulfilling people's unrealistic expectations. What do you think that you're going to gain from helping someone else to fulfill their fantasy when it puts you in a nightmare? It puts you in a nightmare. If you're finding that you're losing yourself and constantly apologizing, experiencing guilt, shame, condemnation, frustration at yourself, like you're wrong for having these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, these desires. How dare you, right? How dare you desire to not go to that meeting today because you need to stay home and take care of your health? Or maybe you need to work on that business instead of going to that social hour with cocktails because you don't even drink, but you're going to sit there and apologize that you don't drink alcohol because everybody else is and you feel bad, but you're going to show up because you want people to be happy with you. So I think that's a bigger root issue is what experience is happening to you when people are unhappy with your choices. And that's something you have to recognize and you have to work through that process. Because as long as you are connected to people's emotions about your choices, you're a slave to their applause. You're a slave to pleasing them and making them satisfied. And so that's going to lead you down this path of always feeling bad if you choose yourself. Anybody else on this call or on this message feeling like, yeah, I feel bad, but I don't choose myself? Well, start choosing yourself a little bit more. And the people who are unhappy with that probably benefited from you never choosing yourself. And so they can go away and your life will actually have more joy and more peace once you draw that boundary. But that's a personal work. That's an inside job. That's making peace, removing the root, going through this emotional surgery of removing that need to please people and the reaction that they have totally being separated from you. Can you relate with that? Have you ever made a decision and someone physically in front of you, you could tell they were displeased with what your decision was and you quickly jumped to, well, no, I can change that. I can move things around. I can move heaven and earth, put myself last, put my kids last. I can put my business on the back burner because I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Have you done that? We're all guilty of doing that at some point, and we have to understand that is actually not healthy behavior. And it's going to hurt you and it's hurting them because you're actually enabling the person you're doing that to. You're enabling them to constantly believe that they can control other people's decisions. And sometimes it's to their demise because they're always looking for someone to be a yes person. They're always looking for someone to bail them out, help them out, figure it out for them. So we enable people. When we're trying to please them and help them and putting ourselves last, we actually cancel the lesson that God is trying to teach them to figure it out for themselves. I had to learn that the guilt that I was feeling was actually toxic to God's plan. Because when I felt guilty or bad, I would try to save people, help people, do things outside of my means because I thought if I didn't, it meant I was a bad person. But what I found was that I was surrounded by all these takers because I was a giver. I was willing and able to give, and I thought I was doing it from the goodness of my heart. And God was like, no, I am telling you to say no. But I felt like it was a dirty word. Did you feel that too? Have you ever had someone kind of act that way, like being, saying no as a dirty word, or we never want to rock the boat or upset people, so we have to keep them satisfied. But that keeps you paying the price. But it's not your bill. It's not up to you to manage people's thoughts, emotions, and feelings about any decisions that you make. I heard a long time ago, what other people's opinions are of me is none of my business. And that kind of set me free because I thought, yeah, if they're upset with me or disappointed in what I decided, or they're not happy that I'm not showing up or whatever, it's none of my business. And I thought, you're right. The more that I knew about it, and the more I pointed it out and chewed on it and tried to control it, I was just miserable. I was so miserable because those are things we can't control, right? Living below the line of responsibility is when we blame, shame, and justify ourselves and our other people. So if I'm being responsible for me, then the blame, shame, justify, that's no longer an issue. I don't have to justify my behavior. I don't have to apologize for anything. I can honor myself and allow other people to accept responsibility for their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions. And so I stopped this guilt game, this blame game, this shaming myself or feeling wrong because I needed to do something for my kids, or I needed to do something for myself or my mental health or whatever that was. There's all these unrealistic expectations out there. And especially if you are an entrepreneur. I'll tell you, when I, started my journey with working for myself as a personal trainer, medical massage therapist, I was a slave to my clients' demands. I didn't realize that setting my own hours was going to mean I had a client that was like, hey, I want to work out at 5 a.m. when I had no desire to train someone at 5 a.m. But I was new to building my business, so I was going to get that client. And so I thought, yeah, I'll get up at 5 a.m. and I will meet you at the gym. And I went against what I knew was healthy for me because I was so determined to get that approval, to get that new client. And now, when you're an entrepreneur, many of you have probably heard this, you're basically jumping off a cliff and building the airplane on the way down. And so as an entrepreneur, you have to, for a short season, not forever, but in the moment sometimes, to get that yes, get that new client, extend yourself a little bit more than normal. You blur those boundaries just a little bit to get those clients because you're building your business and you got to pay the bills and keep the lights on. The challenge was that is, when you start teaching people how to treat you, it comes from having a boundary or not having a boundary with your date book, your time, your schedule. And so when that client came to me and, wanted to sign up for personal training and was like, hey, I want to work out at 5 a.m., I was so desperate at the time, right? We don't see our value. We don't honor ourselves. So I was like, yes, I will work out with you at 4 a.m. if that's what it takes to make a few dollars, right? When you're young and single. And, that's what I did when I was young and single, is I accepted not having boundaries just to build my business. Now, enter getting pregnant and having a baby, having a newborn, and then having clients wanting to work out at 5 a.m. I was still trying to make that work. And when you're a new mom with a baby, trying to get up and work out at 5 a.m. because you're so afraid to lose, right? You're so afraid to lose. And then there's guilt there if you're like, oh, but I'm a new mom, but I don't want to disappoint this client. Well, I've taught her that she could ask to work out at that time of the morning. And I've taught her that I don't have boundaries. I've taught her that she can text me at 3 a.m. if she desires. We teach people how to treat us and where our boundaries are. And when we don't have them and we just say yes to everything, we have no worries. So instead of having guilt of saying no, I was having all this remorse from saying yes and, making it very challenging for my family, my new baby, my health. And I finally had to just say, hey, I appreciate you and I'm happy to work out with you if you're available at 8 a.m. whatever I needed to do. But I didn't know how to do that when I was 23, 24 years old. I hadn't been really taught that. And so I just was like, oh my gosh, I just can't upset this person. I don't want to lose this client, because I was thinking losing a client would say something about my skills. It would say something about my value if I had someone that was upset and it didn't work out. So in my head, I had to make every single transaction work out. Otherwise, I was a failure. Has anybody ever experienced that? If you're listening to this and you identify with that, let me hear from you. I thought that if everybody wasn't completely happy, I was a failure. So even with a new baby, being a new mom, wanting to rest and enjoy that time, I went back to work when my baby was 3 weeks old, because I was pretty much threatened by by the powers that be that ran the gym, that if I didn't return from my maternity leave of 3 weeks, that my 25 clients were going to start going to the other trainers. And I was in shock, because I thought, oh my gosh, that's not like one failure, that's like 25 failures. Y'all feel me on that? Like, I thought, oh man, if this doesn't work out, it says something about me. Absolutely not. If I could go back and tell that younger version of me that had that newborn baby, I would have said, you know what? If somebody wants to work out before 8 a.m., good for them. They can absolutely go with a trainer that has that bandwidth and that capacity, because I didn't know how to draw a line. And it cost me over and over again. The first year of Emma's life, she knew the babysitter. She didn't really know her mom. On her first birthday, I remember very clearly, she didn't want me at all. And it broke my heart. And I left that job. I was like, nope. Left that job, went to a different one, and I changed my hours to like an 8 to 4 o'clock time frame for that season of my life. And I'm thankful that I made that decision. But it was so hard to get over that guilt. It was so challenging to not allow the no's and not allow the